Hi, good morning, Marianna. How are you today? Okay.
Good morning, Chris. Very good, thank you. How are
Welcome.
you?
Yeah, good. Welcome for joining. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I particularly wanted to have a chat with you because actually your life story is very different to the average life story, isn't it? Because you grew up in Slovakia to start with,
Yeah.
And in a communist regime.
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah. I spent first 13 years of my life living in a small village of 2,000 people, which added to the regime.
Sure.
In the central part of Slovakia. We were under Czechoslovakia, obviously part of a heavy Soviet Union influence. So yes, I went to school and I had to stare at the teacher in front of the classroom at the same time at the poster of Lenin framed on the wall. We sung all kinds of Russian songs. There was all kinds of traditions that we had to attend as in school, part of the program. And yeah, we had shops that were same everywhere in the whole country. So, if I bought a pair of shoes that was somewhat lovely, another third of my class had the same pair of shoes. And then, there was one specialty store that you could buy things from like a foreign trade. So I remember when my mom and my dad saved up for a Mickey Mouse shirt, and it was bright red color. And I was wearing it like it's golden. They had to wash it every day because I wanted to wear it over and over because I didn't know who was the Mickey Mouse. But I had never seen the cartoon, obviously. That was not accessible to us. But I was the only one who had that t-shirt. No one else had it. And that felt so special. Yeah, and eventually we were having little access to some of the English songs, although we weren't able to translate and didn't have resources to translate the words of the English songs as of that time. But we liked it and we memorized it, just not knowing what we were singing. So it was sort of fun. It was still such great memories. I felt that I had a happy childhood. I felt everyone was equal. There was a lot of job opportunities. I wasn't aware, and I was actually talking to my dad, that everybody had to have a job. Everybody had to participate in that common collective, well-being of the country. Every trade had to be represented by adequate amount of people. Taxes had to be paid. Everybody contributed to that one whole. And it was in a good way. I think I had a very humble childhood, and I developed a sense of appreciating small things and finding beauty in small things. And when it comes to even activities outside of school, it was just sports. There was one TV per household that wasn't always having programs 24/7. So if there was any cartoon or any fairy tale, it was one per day or one per week. So you just had to go outside and do everything in any and every kind of the weather. And we loved it.
It sounds like boarding school. I think when I was at boarding school, it allowed 1 hour per week of TV, I think it was.
Yeah, exactly. It was, but we weren't missing it. And if that hour came, and we had to make sure that, sometimes it was just sports. My dad and my brother, when the ice hockey was on, or any sports, we just had to all watch it. There wasn't any channels choice. So I felt people were not as materialistic because there wasn't competition. And there weren't many options we were aware of. So we were happy with what we had. Had we been aware, well, many of us, I guess, maybe we would have wanted more, and maybe it would bother us a little bit more, the whole regime life.
And has that growing up period, that culture, been a good grounding for you as you came into? Because when you traveled to the US, I assume that was quite a culture shock at a later date.
Yes. So when I've always wanted a little bit more, and obviously I was 12 or 13 when the gentle revolution happened and communism was gone. But it lasted a little bit longer. And as I was growing up into teenage years, I started having my dreams and desires, and we started having more access to what's going on in Western countries and in US. And US was this big blown up dream, country of dreams, country of opportunities. You know, a lot of things during the communism that were kind of negative were that you couldn't always just be who you want to be. Things were very restricted. You couldn't say what you wanted to say because you never knew how that could impact your future. You know, for example, I couldn't do my first communion in my local village church because I didn't know if it's going to affect my dad's job. So we had to do it secretly in the town 3 hours away from us. So a lot of things were very hidden, and there was a lot of things that could disable you from focusing on your future to be better than others. And you just had to really settle for less. And that was the constant mindset and reminder that, you know, you can't be who you want to be, not always. And that you have very strict regulations that can go against you anytime, and it can backfire on you based on your actions. So freedom was a big thing. So US was always, when we started having and learning stories and started having access to US movies and everything, it was just like, wow, you can do all this, you can go to there and there, and obviously travel. All of a sudden I realized how big the world is, and all I wanted to do was travel. So US was sort of a land of dreams and opportunities for me, and I knew that I had to find a way how to get there. And it was easy to get visa through a student agency at that time that was doing the cultural exchange program, specifically au pairing. That's how I came to US. My first visa was because I agreed to take care of 2 little kids in the middle of Washington, DC. And I had to do school side by side, which I had to pay for, which also is something that under communism, you don't pay for school or any education whatsoever. So to pay for my school, I couldn't pay for my au pair money. So I had to bartend and learn how to get into some sort of jobs, which I did pick bartending, but it kind of picked me, I would have to say, because maybe
there's a story behind this, isn't there, if I remember right?
Yes, Ben wrote a story. It was the little white lie I used. One of those moments when I was on a date, actually, in this beautiful Mediterranean restaurant. First time ever I tried pita bread and hummus, which I had no idea what it was before. And it was just so beautifully decorated. It was that classic Mediterranean feel, you know, the orangey warm colors, the candles everywhere, the little branches of trees and plants everywhere. It was just, yeah, I was just in heaven. And I asked the gentleman who took me out for dinner there, I said, you know, can I just work here? How do you get a job in a place like that? And I remember coming back from ladies' room, and he was talking to the owner. I think he was trying to impress me, or maybe the owner knew him. I don't remember. But the next thing I know, the owner asked me, well, have you bartended before? And that was that moment when I had a choice. And I don't think it was long enough moment to really analyze what the consequences of my answer would be. But I did say yes. And he hired me there on the spot. He obviously liked my smile and liked how maybe fearless or just wanting to really be there. He saw that. And I started next Thursday. I spent 5 days just studying the Bartending for Dummies book that I quickly got myself in a bookstore. And I was just going from bar to bar every evening and talking to bartenders and writing down the most popular drinks, so I'm not caught off guard. But, you know, obviously coming to the bar the first day and seeing that there's 13 types of vodkas, it was just, I was really acting it that day. And at the end, the bartender that I was helping out, I was supposed to help out on specific days on happy hours. At the end, the bartender that I was helping out actually said quietly to me, she said, you know, I'll tell you something, you never bartended in your life before, but I'm not going to tell anyone because you made us double tips. Because I was just chatty, I was loving, I was somehow just out there being the genuine hospitalian. Because I knew that's all you have to do is just be kind, be nice, be genuine, and give yourself out there for the guests that are coming and decided to enjoy your establishment.
And how did you find Washington? Because you built quite a career in Washington, D.C., didn't you? You worked at the Williard, you worked at the Oriental, you worked with Alain Ducasse.
Yes.
I mean, it was. You obviously enjoyed Washington, D.C., did you?
Yes, I spent 13 years in Washington, D.C. I've started with my bartending and sort of supervisor shifts and did that for a few years because it paid for my school. And I needed to keep my school, even though I already had a degree from back home, because that was the only visa extension possible. But I was always wanting to experience the structure and learn from the biggest and the best in hospitality that there were. So yeah, the Mandarin Oriental opening was wonderful, was huge. That was the first place where I experienced the power of brand and engagement with brand. I remember the opening rally that they did with us, with employees. It was 600 employees for 600 rooms. They were really trying to get the 5 stars. And we were all in this ballroom, and there were all this whole day program. And I came home that day, I had tears in my eyes, and I was ready to die for everything they do. I was ready to die for every guest that entered the lobby. My life was Mandarin Oriental. I gave my everything to that just because of the power of that onboarding and of the brand standards, the mission, the vision, and everything that they've kind of inserted into us. Yeah, and Williard Intercontinental was a fantastic experience. It was the residence of the presidents. So I've served a lot of important people, and just really had an opportunity to grow into being a leader, learning on so many mistakes, attending a lot of trainings and whatnot, just being me, and really passionately mentoring others. That's where I really fell in love with.
The Washington culture is quite unique, isn't it, in my experience? It's a very strange city, isn't it?
It is. Now that I live in a lot of other places, for me, it was still big enough, because remember, I came from the village. So for me, it was, wow, big city. And it was also a safe destination because it's very, law and order. Everything is rather safe. But it was very, the food and beverage scene, for example, when I moved there in 1999, and where it was when I was leaving 13 years later, it was 2 different stories. There was lots of chain restaurants, lots of burger places, nothing really gourmet or upscale so much. I opened the first Michelin star chef restaurant in Washington, D.C. when Alain Ducasse came there. I didn't even know what Michelin star rating was after years of being in hospitality. So it was really very government oriented, a lot of people just wearing dark colors. I wouldn't say necessarily there wasn't anything prescribed, but it was just automatic choice. So if I was on a street as a true European with yellow shoes and a lot of colors, people would be looking at me at some point. I was a little wild at that time, perceived a little wild, just because I was just, it was perceived flashy, because DC was very kind of settled, little, I don't want to say boring, because if people from DC hear me, they might not like it, but it did become a little bit boring. But it changed.
It's a very functional city, isn't it?
It is.
It's Monday to Friday, and the weekends are completely dead, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, not anymore, because the central neighborhoods are more alive now. A lot of chefs and restaurateurs really took over small spaces. And the moment these neighborhood gem areas and neighborhood gem kind of concepts started blooming, there is so much more going on in central DC. So it's different now. It definitely is.
That's good. And then you went to New York after that, because that must have been a bigger culture shock in some ways.
Yes. It was. And just before I left for New York, I worked for the Inn at Little Washington, which was an hour and a half from Washington, D.C., in a small village. Speaking of coming from, I thought that my village in Slovakia with 2,000 people was tiny. This one had 150 residents.
150.
Yes, and 70 out of the 150 worked for the Inn at Little Washington, worked from the hotel. So it was just really wonderful experience. It was theatrical show. It was at this time, actually years after, they are the only awarded place in whole Washington, D.C. and Virginia that has 3 Michelin stars. Oh, wow. At that time when I worked there, the Michelin rating wasn't coming there. But literally, so when you're speaking Washington, D.C., I was still at least a city. Then I spent almost 2 years at the Inn at Little Washington, which was a tiny village. And from that 150 residence place, I went to New York, 11 million. So that was a shock. But I think what surprised me a lot in New York was that people were very open. And it didn't take me that long to build relationships and to be connected. And as large as New York seems, and it is by all means a large city, of course, a lot of, once you're in the hospitality industry and you're just open and talking to people and creating these relationships and bonding with people that have the same passion, you just start feeling that it's a small village. All of a sudden, everybody knows everybody. All of a sudden, I had, tons of people on the speed dial. All of a sudden, I was getting discounts in restaurants because it was easy to connect. And obviously, millions of restaurants, so not everything aligned. But it was really, really 6.5 years of me going out and eating and exploring concepts and cuisines and connecting. That's something that I really felt sad about when leaving New York, that I finally connected. I felt like the city was mine. And then I had to kind of just completely move to continents, but it is what it is.
How did the US culture impact on you? What did you learn from the US?
Well, US, first of all, I've learned I lived with a Jewish family when I moved to US as an au pair for 2 years. And they were real Americans that were really proud and really stood for all everything that America stands for, whether it's the freedom, whether it's the power within the world, whether it's how they believed in their leadership and everything. So it was very, it was very, very strong feel about belonging, of the belonging in general. The biggest learning, I guess, was when I entered corporate America world. Being the shining star at the Mandarin Oriental, and actually being laid off just because they overhired, which I was told, it's not you, it's the position that's been just crossed out of the staffing schedule. And I just couldn't understand that. But how is it not me? How can you try to nominate me for manager of the quarter and then lay me off the next day? But that's the corporate America, So there were a lot of experiences where you had a feeling that you're irreplaceable one day and then you're so replaceable the next day. But there was also a lot of experiences where you just turn them into positive and grow with them so much, so many opportunities. All of a sudden, it was like the opposite of my growing up. It was just opening doors everywhere, and all you had to do is walk in. And not everyone has, maybe a fearless factor of personality like I did, but I think because I wasn't able to do anything I wanted, really not knowing there were opportunities, but knowing that you can, for me, the whole life was just like, why not? Everything that was ever presented to me, and these were the tons of opportunities in the US, was just kind of, why not answer? Okay, let me try, let me grab this, let me do this. If they think so, well, the only way to find out is if I try. So I think these opportunities, this whole, like, the idea that sky is the limit is something that really, really transformed my thinking and my mindset. Learning that you create your own life, you create your own happiness. There's no one to tell you what to do, no one mandating and putting limits and obstacles in your journey. You're the only decision maker, because the doors are opening every day, everywhere.
We'll get onto your coaching in a second. And London, in contrast, how has London come to London in contrast to up to New York?
London, I was actually, we moved here obviously because my partner had a great job opportunity, but also because we knew we didn't plan to really stay in New York for a long time. We thought when we moved to New York, we told ourselves that it's going to be a few years, that we want to experience it. We want to be part of that rush when we're young enough to be able to do that and keep up with that pressure and speed of life in New York. So we knew we wanted to change. We didn't quite know if it's UK or if it's staying in US. We're both citizens and US citizens as well. But I was actually surprised coming to UK and coming to London, because to me it's like New York, but it's just more beautiful and it's just more beautiful. I would say it's diverse. There's work opportunities, job opportunities. There's systems. There's practices in place. There's sense of communities, which, believe it or not, in New York was as well. The diversity is really what all I need is diversity. And obviously the sense of culture is a little bit nicer here, and I enjoy that a lot. New York is a fascinating city, but London is just beautiful, and there's a lot of community feel and a lot of collective efforts made, a lot of much bigger and maybe much deeper feeling of belonging, I guess. And maybe it's just my European roots, I don't know. And maybe it's the age. Maybe I appreciate different things nowadays, you know.
We all change. And now you've just written a book, which you hope to release next month. Is that right?
Yes, I hope towards the end.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
And tell us a bit about the book. Tell us what it's about.
So the book was an idea when I've wrapped up my VP role in food and beverage. My contract ended last year, and it was more of a decision to learn something new and step into a world of coaching. And the whole transition of how that happened last year, and plus being able to stay in touch with a lot of people that I've mentored over the years. As I moved to UK, I realized the power of my mentorship, because when you do it automatically, and when you're just being you, and when you just say the right thing or do the right thing because that's how you just feel it, it doesn't resonate so much. But when these people get in touch with you, or when they hear that you're leaving, you're moving, or you just moved for not, and you start reconnecting, and they're reaching out to you, and you start receiving emails, notes, and everything, you really realized how you had impact on their lives. So I wanted to really just tell my story, and I realized that maybe I have a gift to inspire, and maybe I did have gifts to motivate people and to change their life. Well, they do it themselves, but I had that power of being that facilitator. So it sort of aligned with my coaching as a something new that I was really started feeling passionate about, as I wanted to contribute a little bit more into the industry. And I wanted to share my story, because it's not all perfection. I wanted to share the good, the bad, and I wanted that to align with what I do, because maybe it's because the way I was raised and the way I grew up, there was a lot of reminders of what you can't do. And now I wanted to pass along what you can do. And that book sort of aligns with 20 years of my step-by-step career moves and life moves, and people will have a chance to, readers will have a chance to pause and reflect, because each chapter will end with a coaching kind of question, making them really pause and think about when they may have been in the similar situation, when they may have lived this same story or hear about anything, and really make them pause and think for themselves whether they made the right decision, and just be in their thinking environment world.
I find when you write, it makes you think about things differently.
Yeah.
What did you learn from doing the book? What did you learn about yourself?
Writing it was actually an easy part because I was just really telling a story. It was really an easy part, but it made me actually remember so much more as I was writing it. And it made me, this is exactly like how the coaching works as well. When you write things down, they all of a sudden pick up a different depth, and so much more, many more details come up for you. So the writing was just the same for me. You know, I outlined what I wanted to pass and tell. And all of a sudden, another story came up that was really just important to mention, because each story had a huge growth and learning aspect to it, a huge moving forward. It sort of, all of a sudden, it became so easily, it was an easy flow of how the events progressed and how I progressed as a person, or how I matured within my leadership roles, what opinions I had. So I have to say, things I thought to myself, which I described at the beginning of the book, felt like I was a different person 20 years later when I was ending the book. And I think reader will be able to actually feel that.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. That sounds very good. What's been the biggest influence in your life, in your career? Because it's been a very good career, hasn't it? So, yeah.
Yes, it was a lovely career. It was,
It's not over yet, by the way.
Sorry?
Not over yet, by the way.
No.
Long way to go yet.
19 years and it's not over. Yes. You know, I really grabbed it because I knew I have this unique opportunity. Not everyone was able to stay in US. Not everyone was able to get into positions or work. I knew a lot of Slovak girls that came to US actually, and they got married and they didn't want to do any career. They just wanted to live a peaceful life, well, you know, have a big family. So not everyone had that drive. For me, it was almost like, well, if I have to be so far away from my family, I'm going to do more. I'm going to grab everything I can as an opportunity, and I'm going to try everything I can. And obviously I wanted to climb up the ladder, and I cared a lot about being able to prove to myself and that I can do it and accept the challenges, anything that came with the learning. So yeah, going from bartender to a VP was a wonderful journey. A lot of people influenced me. I have to say that there wasn't one mentor. There were few, and I have to say that even leaders and people that were maybe a bit of a negative impact, which my book describes as well openly. These are the learning experiences as well. That's mentoring as well. I have to say, not only people that tell you what to do in which situation and that have the positive impact, the negative impacts are the learning experiences too. So I would really include them in such life changers and contributors to my career and story.
So what now? You're doing executive coaching. What are your aspirations now for your career? Next steps?
So I think I'm trying to introduce this approach as a coaching techniques to what I've been doing and enjoying. You know, I looked through my CV when I made this decision, and I literally crossed off things that I no longer want to do. And then I highlighted the things that I really, really enjoy. Because, you know, life is short. We have to do what we truly, truly enjoy. Now, I'll always enjoy talking to guests in the restaurants, but I think I don't want to do the being on a floor in the restaurant, for example, anymore. However, highlighting the importance of people is something that I've always wanted to do. And I think the society needs it, the world needs it. I think people are left on their own. You know, I hear stories about, chefs that have, you know, anxiety issues or or can handle their emotional intelligence, but you know, HR departments are too busy to deal with them on personal level and to support them. You only hear about when they're told you can't do this anymore. But how are you going to really develop that person on the personal level, on the individual level? Who has time for the one-on-ones? So I feel that importance of coaches and mentors that are objective people, that are available to these leaders, to support them and to facilitate that balance, and to make sure that every maybe challenge or issue that they go through is being discussed to the depth so they can take the best part out of it. So I wanted to align that and the coaching technique, obviously, that I'm versed in right now, with building of the processes and systems and standards for companies. You know, it always starts and ends with the same thing. First, you know, company would say, the leader of the company would say, or the CEO, well, we have communication issues. Okay, then after I speak to a few employees, we find out communication is really not the issue. People do talk, people do copy themselves on emails, people do find
it's often a communications message, isn't it? It's actually what's said rather than actually communication.
It's the content. It's the hidden frustration behind, because the processes are outdated, because there's no belief in a brand or in the purpose that company has behind, because there's toxic environments, obviously, or because there is generation gaps that kind of lacks, kind of really shows that there's kind of the alignment is not so core. You know, we still have a lot of kind of old style leaders that, you know, still kind of believe in the whole control command. That's not going to work with the younger generations, and they actually need to admit that, get out of denial, and
well, I don't think they need to admit it. They just don't always get it, because the world's changing, isn't it?
And that's the only thing they know. That's the only thing I did know. I had a lot of mentors, and my supervisors, my people that I reported to, were that same style, and I was that style for many years. You know, it was just having a whip, and the stricter you were, the more control you had, the better of a leader you were in some sense. But right now that is changing, and these people need help. These leaders like me and these leaders of mine, and they're still out there. You know, if this gap is not breached, if no one helps them as objective person from outside, having no agenda outside of just making things work, then they are going to just, you know, experience the toxic environments.
I think that's right. I think that's one of the really interesting things at this moment, that out of this period, people want genuine, authentic messages again. And actually for companies to have that mission, genuine mission again, and understand what your mission is, rather than people talking about financial projects or this must be your P&L result. It has to be, but it has to be also prove a particular purpose. People want that purpose again.
Definitely. I have, you know, I've spoken to a few students, as the graduates, hospitality school graduates, recently. We've connected really well. I started mentoring one of them, and then I connected with a couple of others. And it's really interesting to hear what they are looking for. When they look for companies to work for, they want to know what their mission and vision is. They want to know what else they contribute in outside of just making profits. You know, what do they do for the planet? What do they do for the employees? What's their roadmap? It has to be already outlined. They're not going to wait for 1 year to have their performance review to see how they are doing. No, they want to know much faster. They want to know, what is it going to look like? If I'm going to work for this company for 2 years, who am I going to become? And how is the journey going to look like? How do you do it as a company? And it needs to be impressive. The whole, you know, just, you know, making the rich owner richer doesn't work anymore.
No, the world's moving on. It's going to be fascinating to see how it does. Marianna, can I say thank you today? You joined us. We've gone way over our time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I wish you well the book. I look forward to reading it.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Chris.
No, it's my pleasure.
Have a good day.
And you.